Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Just going to give it another minute or so. I'm seeing the numbers go up, but yeah, just want to give it a minute before we get started, just to give people a chance to join. Hi, everybody. For those that just joined, we're just waiting just for other people to join and then we'll get started. But yeah, nice to see you all here today. I can see the numbers going up. But yeah, we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so. Right, the numbers have stopped, so that's my cue to get cracking. Hello again, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. I just said on another call, I was like, am I still allowed to say Happy New Year? 8 days in, but thanks so much for joining today. Appreciate everyone probably having very busy period getting back to work. But yeah, thanks for joining our first webinar of 2026 here at Linnworks. As the title says, today we're going to unlock consumer trends and metrics that will define e-commerce in 2026. So what does that actually mean? So in a nutshell, today's session is all about understanding what really changed in e-commerce over the last year and what that means for how you plan, operate, and hopefully grow in 2026. What we covered today, we've got agenda here. It's all going to be backed up by real data, also real customer behavior, real outcomes we're seeing across the market. And our aim is to hopefully provide some actionable takeaways for you based on the data that we'll cover in this session. But yeah, just looking at the agenda that we have on here, this is what we're going to cover. So first, we will unpack what changed during peak season in 2025. So especially around Black Friday in particular, and why that matters more than ever, looking at the metrics that we've uncovered from that period. And then we'll move into consumer expectations for 2026. That'll be using fresh survey data that we've just conducted recently at Linnworks. So we'll bring you the insights that we found from that. And then finally, we will bring it all together and we'll talk about the metrics that actually matter and hopefully help you outperform competitors. At the end, you can see here, we'll have plenty of time for the Q&A. So please drop your questions in. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. Do it as you go. Don't feel like you have to wait until the end to get your questions in. I'll be keeping an eye on them throughout. So yeah, don't be shy. Any questions you have, there's no silly question. Just get them in and we'll make sure to get to them at the end, hopefully. So yeah, before we dive in, let me just quickly introduce our speakers for today. So firstly, I'm Lucy. I look after product and partner marketing here at Linnworks. I've been at Linnworks for 4.5 years, and I will be our moderator for today. And then I'm really happy to introduce our speakers. They are both product and data experts, which you will quickly realize. I learn so much from them every time I talk to them, which is why they're here today to do the same for all of you. But yeah, first up, we have Kate from Linnworks, who's actually worked across multiple teams at Linnworks, but is now our product analyst. Kate, would you mind just introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hey, everybody. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Like Lucy said, I've held a few roles across Linnworks, and prior to that, my background was mostly in operations. So I believe I bring a really interesting perspective to some client data um, in a way that helps us understand what the data actually tells us, and translating what is happening in your data to what's happening in your operations or within your business. Been at Linnworks for 5.5 years, um, and enjoyed every second of it. So thanks, Lucy.
Amazing. Thanks, Kate. And then we have Hannah, who leads partnerships at Conjura. But I actually learned the other day, used to be in a similar role as Kate as a product analyst. But yeah, Hannah, thanks so much for joining us today. Would you mind doing the same as Kate and just briefly introducing yourself as well, please?
Thanks, Lucy. And thanks everybody for attending today, especially early on in the year. I know everybody's still so busy. I hope you have a couple of have your pens ready and can scribble down couple of useful insights that we can share today. I've been at Conjura for nearly 7 years now. Been working in the e-commerce space for that time, and working very closely with brands across a number of roles, be it customer success or an analyst, as Lucy mentioned. And my passion really is working with brands to leverage their data for growth. And there's so much that can be unlocked from their data. And in Conjura, we're in the business of democratizing data so brands of every size, shape, and creed can utilize it. And I think we've some really interesting insights from some of our studies that we've done that we can share that you can bring forward to 2026. So thanks so much.
Amazing. So, Hannah, you've teed us up perfectly for the next slide. Like I said, we are going to start off talking about 2025 peak, which probably feels a bit of a distant memory after the break and the holidays, even though it wasn't very long ago. But yeah, we just wanted to kick off with doing a bit of a recap and show how it compared to previous years. So, straight away, I'm going to hand over to Hannah. Would you be able to talk about this a bit more? Let us know what stood out most about peak 2025 compared to 2024 from Conjura's perspective.
Yeah, so we always take a look, deep dive underneath the hood as to what's happening on the ground across brands. So we looked across all our brands um, during this peak period and in comparison to 2024. We looked at the run up to kind of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, so the 11 days running up. As we know, there's a lot of activity happens then. And we looked across a number of different geographies across some of the key KPIs, such as revenue, discounting, ROAS, ad spend. And I think there's three that I've called out here based on that micro paper. Um, it's the comparative increase in revenue in the ramp up period or the 11 day period prior to Black Friday versus the increase in revenue on Black Friday, which I think is incredibly interesting. And it does call to a behavioral change that to other years where we've seen shoppers are browsing early but holding off purchasing until Black Friday itself. And this shift isn't accidental. We do think it's kind of more strategic, and many consumers are waiting till payday to coincide with the big ticket purchases, while others are simply holding it to make sure that they're getting the best, I suppose, discount that they can out there. And then, what is really interesting, we always, in my mind, I associate Black Friday, Cyber Monday with such hefty discounts. But across both the UK and European brands, they were quite strategic in how they discounted and actually reduced their depth of discount by 5%. So I think that is an incredibly interesting um, behavioral change, is that people aren't two behavioral changes. People were doing a lot of browsing, and we could see from our traffic in that run-up period. And then again, the big burst of increase in revenue was actually on Black Friday rather than in the ramp up before. And then brands are boxing clever in what they can actually give away in terms of discounts. Um, and just they actually were clever across the UK and European brands that we analysed, and their average depth of discount they reduced, and all the while that's not giving away as much margin, but while it's still encouraging the customer to buy. So they were the things that popped out for me from the analysis we did. And I think the behavioral shift from people browsing and then purchasing on Black Friday very much leads to implications from an operational perspective and operational readiness and peak. So rather than the kind of a spread in buying, there's a much more peak interest on that actual day or 2 days over the that holiday period. So I think that might lead me on to, or Lucy, do you have a question specifically for Kate around some of the really interesting insights that Linworks have found?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kate, Hannah, on your part, it's so interesting. We're seeing like a lot of brands and retailers having to feel the pressure of like having to do things earlier when it comes to Black Friday. It seems like every year Black Friday and that period is getting earlier and earlier, but it's so interesting to actually see in the stats that you've pulled that regardless of how much earlier people are getting, the consumer's still waiting. They just don't want to
Mm,
risk of like buying something and then see it a few days later that it's been discounted more. So
discounted.
yeah, I just think it's really interesting to see that people are holding out despite that the sales seem to be like a longer and longer period. But yeah, to your point, I think that's teed Kate up really nice. My question, Kate, from your perspective and Linwork's perspective, is like, did these stats show up on the operation aspect as well? It would just be great for you to talk through the findings that we saw from Linworks and our customers.
Yeah, both of you are correct. We did see that concentration feed through into operations. So one of the things we've pointed out here is that we had a 23, or our users rather, had a 23% rise in order volume during peak period compared to last year. That's really awesome, right? All that growth is really great. You've worked really hard to get those sales. But then what happens when you have to do the other side of the sale, which is the fulfillment piece? Um, at the bottom of this box here, we have another stat that talks about our average daily automations. So an automation for Linworks is something that the system does on your behalf that normally a human would have to do. It's things like sorting orders into appropriate folders or routing orders to the specific distribution center you want to use or the warehouse that will fulfill it. There's even logic that you could build in around like choosing cheaper shipping options or looking at the locality of where the order is going to go, or if a customer purchased 3 different times, but they have one delivery address, looking for ways to combine those to save on shipping. That's what we mean when we say automations. So in Linworks, we don't have a lot of say over how many orders you're going to be bringing in, but we can help you with what happens to those orders once they're in the system. So what I want to highlight is that we had 23% rise in order volume, and we see that echoed in operations with that 23% increase in the daily operations that, daily automations that happened on Black Friday. When we look at that compared to the week prior, it's a smaller increase, but then we looked at the monthly average and it nearly doubled. So that's, all of that work concentrated in one particular day for your warehouse who normally works at a pretty steady or consistent clip. Now you have to find ways to eke out even more like productivity from your team. It's really hard to accomplish if you don't have something like an automation that can help take some of the load off.
Yeah, sorry, okay.
Yeah, that's all.
I was just going to say that's such a big jump, like a massive increase. And I know like people will probably feel it with like the chaos of Black Friday and peak season, and they'll feel like the operational like strain, but actually seeing the numbers of like the impact on like the how Lim works, the automations, it's just yeah, it's just really powerful seeing that. I know you mentioned like a few examples of like these types of automations, but would you just be able to to cover a few more of like what that would look like in the warehouse or like the different types of orders? Could you just like bring that to life a bit more, some examples of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So let's picture an operation that has a pretty healthy direct-to-consumer line of their business. And then maybe you've started experimenting with adding B2B into your business model mix, or perhaps you started as B2B and you've slowly transitioned into direct to consumer. That means that you now have two wildly different order fulfillment flows. And it can be challenging to balance between the two, especially when we talk about all of this extra labor that gets super concentrated on one day. So the rules engine could do things like separating orders, separating those B2B orders from your direct to consumer orders and placing them in folders or assigning them to a specific warehouse. Like if your wholesale operation predominantly works off of drop shipping, you can filter those out before any human has to interact with that order. So you're reducing the touch on the order, reducing the amount of man hours that have to be spent managing that order, which means then that any amount of profit is actually profit and it's not being used to pay for somebody having to manage an order.
Hmm.
That's one scenario. Another scenario might be splitting shipment. So if you have customers who are ordering really differently sized items, so you have some items that are relatively the same size and relatively the same weight, they can be packaged together in a way that's likely going to save you shipping. And then let's say there's another item on their order that's really bulky or heavy. We can get those separated from each other. So the system will deal with two different workflows really easily. Instead of trying to have a human interject in those workflows and try to orchestrate it, you can have the machine do it for you.
Amazing. And we've actually, like I said, I was going to be keeping an eye on the Q&A that was coming through. We've just actually had a question that's relevant to what you're talking about, Kate. Gary asked, does Linnworks provide insight into inbound inventory to help manage demand velocity? So I imagine this is around stock forecasting, but yeah, Kate, do you mind covering that, or we can do that at the end? But I thought because it seemed relevant with what you're talking to raise it now.
Yeah, I think we could spend a little bit of time talking about it. Hannah, I might tap you in to talk about how Conjura can help from the forecasting side of things. But for Linnworks, I'm going to try not to spend too much time digging into this, Gary, but when we talk about help with managing incoming inventory, if you're working off of purchase orders, um, and there's like two different types of purchase orders you could have, or there's probably a lot more than that. But let's narrow it to two. Let's say some of the purchase orders you work off of are ad hoc, they're relatively small volumes. Your suppliers might be geographically fairly near you, so you purchase frequently at smaller amounts. Or there could be the other side of that, where you have purchase orders that are large purchase orders that like blanket purchase orders that are for huge amounts, high dollar amounts, but you have them split up over like on a schedule. Um, Either of those situations we would work fairly well with. And we can see, like, you would use Linnworks to record what items are coming in. And then once that item hits your dock, actually get that inventory into your warehouse, into the system, and then the system would distribute it to your channels. But at this point, Hannah, if you're okay talking about some of the demand forecasting side of what
Hmm.
they were asking about.
Yeah, for sure. So we're kind of more upstream of what Kate was talking about, in the sense that we use your historical data to build out um, inventory forecasts and forecasts both on revenue, stock, ad spend based on incorporating both seasonal forecasts, seasonal impacts, the calendar, and your own historical data in terms of how you performed to predict like 30, 60, 90, 365 days ahead across both products, revenue, ad spend, ROAS, so you can get an insight as to um, where the need will be for certain inventory for certain products. So that's identifying the need, and then Kate and the Linworks team support you through getting that landed and processed into the dock. So hopefully that's a light touch base, and we can dive into it in further detail afterwards as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gary, if you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we can follow up with you afterwards as well. So yeah, great. Perfect. If we go to the next slide, so we're just going to dive deeper a bit more into peak findings. So again, this question is back to you, Hannah. So looking at ad spend in particular, I found this part of the recent Conjura micro paper like really interesting. But yeah, would you be able to explain what Conjura noticed in terms of ad spend, performance, efficiency, and any differences across regions during peak?
Yeah, of course. I suppose that, the main, why do we spend ad spend? We spend ad spend to shift all that inventory and stock that we have bought for peak. And what our brands in the industry are always really interested to find out is, where do you get your best bang for your buck? Be it geo, be it platform, what's the most performance? And I think what's really interesting here, remembering what I was saying, is that there was a kind of a long nurture through the ramp up to Black Friday. You can see here in the UK, they reduced their ad spend, which is the only geography in our analysis that actually reduced their ad spend by 5.59%, while still growing, might I point out, while those in the US increased their ad spend by 13.33, and then across the European brands, it was just over 30% increase in ad spend. And I think that the call out here is that it's very, again, people are being pragmatic in terms of the depth of discount they're giving, but people are being really pragmatic around where they're going to spend that ad spend. And I think the next thing to call out is across the chart that you see on your screen here is that there's been a significant shift in the percent in where people are placing their ad spend. So you can see that TikTok's been a huge emerger for has had a huge increase on Black Friday day. So on the actual Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday period, the increase in ad spend on TikTok has significantly increased. And I suppose one of the things that we have seen, having worked with lots of brands over the years, is that TikTok was a known entity last year, but very much a lot of people weren't established. And people are very wary of using untried and untested platforms or geographies in a sales period like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because they're so reliant. The headline figure is 40% of revenue comes for most brands comes from that period. Their annual revenue comes from that period. So they're not going to risk it by gambling it on a new platform. But what we can see here is that there is a considerate shift towards TikTok and TikTok Shop in 2025, which shows and illustrates there's a huge confidence shift in that platform for this year and this Cyber Monday. And I think, quite clearly we can see that shift was focused on the actual Black Friday, Cyber Monday day itself. As we know, TikTok is a very high speed consume, um, quick reaction platform. It's not a long consideration period, so focusing the ad spend on a day where people are going to make those that spend and those purchases um, has clearly shown results across the board. Um, I think from my perspective, the big thing, from what we've seen here is it reiterates what we saw in the previous slide, is that across the geographies, in particular the UK geography, they're focusing on that considering nurturing their customers through that pre-Black Friday, Cyber Monday phase, and then really focusing on getting that sale acquisition and multiple acquisitions and sales through over the line on the actual Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale in terms of the revenue that has been generated. So I think, Lucy, for me, it's the headline is moving from, you know, a spray and pray across lots of platforms and geos to being much more concentrated, always looking for their best bang for their buck, in a very, very important revenue generating period for brands.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to say that. I think it's easy to try and like spread the spend and the focus across that period because sometimes it could be a bit of a guesswork what's going to work. But to your point and the data that's been shown on both of these slides, it's very evident that it's better to be more concentrated on the actual day, which sounds obvious, but it's only when you see these stats here that it just kind of confirms that's the right thing to do. And yeah, I was going to follow up and ask about what we're seeing on this slide around TikTok, but I
Mm,
completely agree with you that not that TikTok's not been around for a while. I'm not saying it's like
mm,
TikTok shop's a new thing, but as it's maturing, I think to your point, people are gaining more trust in it. They're seeing it pay off in certain things. So that's why we're noticing it. But yeah, if there's anything else that you wanted to just add on that part about TikTok in particular, or any of the other um,
mm.
social platforms, then yeah, please mention if there's anything
I
else.
think the big th thing with TikTok is it's by no means a new platform, and by no means is TikTok Shop a new platform. But what we're seeing, the early adopters, especially in TikTok Shop, were young startups that had I suppose less risk averse. And now we can see that the larger enterprise brands are adopting it and getting huge success with it, which is, when you start seeing the Marks and Spencers with TikTok Shop, et cetera, you know that it is gaining traction and gaining adoption. And then the other thing I would always say to brands, and and it sounds so obvious, but in 2023, the way Black Friday, Cyber Monday landed in conjunction with the payday calendar, it actually landed before like payday. So there was this kind of staggered false start over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then actually people, 2 or 3 days later when payday came in, people. So it is highly correlated to payday dates.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, it was huge success on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but this year paydays and Black Friday, Cyber Monday aligned. So that's
Yeah.
always something operationally, spend wise, campaign wise, brands are always aware of the actual how those two calendars intertwine and the behavior that will then generate.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you put it like that. So great. Okay, cool. That kind of wraps up what we were going to discuss about peak season. This was top level what we were discussing, but if you do want to go deeper into this data that Hannah and Kate have shared, we've included a QR code here that goes to Conjura's Black Friday micropaper. This breaks it down in much more detail. Like I said, Hannah's covered a lot of this information, but if you would like to know more, then please scan that. We'll share it with you afterwards as well. But yeah, I know, Hannah, you kind of just like summarized some of the points here, but just to close out this section on peak, would you be able to just summarize what was covered, key takeaways and trends? That would be great.
And I think if I start at the bottom and just say the 2025 winners didn't spend more or discount harder, they boxed clever with smarter spend later and with a profit in mind. And always when I see a brand being clever with discounts, you know that they're watching their margins, which helps, you know, infinitely across the business. But ultimately, I suppose Black Friday isn't fading at all. I don't think the fact that it was highly concentrated, I think there's just, a longer nurture period, which also longer nurture period often it can not only create better conversion, but also conversion at a higher average order value as well, which everybody wants. Um, the efficiency, I think the call out across the UK of like a decrease in ad spend, but still growing in terms of overall revenue, efficiency beats volume and peak spend completely. And then the social first channels are now significantly performance drivers, what I said around TikTok. So ad spend allocation shifted significantly towards Meta at plus 34% and TikTok plus 65%, like clearly reflecting their growing role across last minute decision and discovery making. Um, and then I mentioned the point about discounts and then profitability. The top performers we have seen across our studies are always focused on profitability and not just doing, there is a time and place for site-wide discounts, but it's only if it's focused on the right outcomes and the right behavior in terms of what you want your customer to be doing. And I think these are the takeaways in terms of how we saw Black Friday play out. But the big focus for all brands in this period now, first working week back in January, is how do you convert those Black Friday spends into their first, second, and subsequent purchases? And then the inverse of that is like, how do you identify those that were just bargain hunters and don't waste your time on trying to get back in? So, really creating a customer that is loyal, generates a high LTV for you as a brand is the paramount focus for brands in this phase post Cyber Monday and Black Friday.
Amazing. And talking of loyalty, you again teed us up nice, Hannah, for the next part. So, yeah, we're going to shift gears here a bit and talk about the consumer's perspective and what that looks like for 2026. So, I mentioned at the start, here at Linnworks, we recently ran a large consumer survey to understand how shoppers are behaving and what they actually expect from online retailers. This was based on 4,000 online shoppers, and this was across the UK and US. So we got perspectives from them regions, and they were adults who shop online at least once a month. That was the criteria for that. But yeah, what this gave us was like a really clear picture of shopper motivations, their priorities, also some frustrations heading into 2026. So really interesting report that we looked at. But yeah, Kate, I'm going to hand this over to you based on this data that we found, and we've put some of it in this slide here. What did the data tell you about how consumer expectations are changing, how they're adapting going into 2026? Oh, you're on mute, Kate. That's not been left behind in
Thank you.
2025.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So one of the first things we call out right away is the mobile first behavior. So 64% of shoppers saying that smartphones are their primary shopping device. One quick thing I want to add to that, and it's something, Lucy, we've actually talked about a lot, and I've talked about it with a couple other people recently, is whether or not you're purchasing on your phone or like a laptop or a device with a larger screen sometimes can be about like the value of the purchase. So one thing I wanted to mention here is users are reporting that their smartphone is their primary gateway into finding your products, but it's not always going to be the thing that they complete the purchase on. We'll talk more about that later. But there was one caveat I wanted to point out here, just something for everybody to be considering. Price of item might have something to do with this here. We would need to investigate that further, but I wanted to call it out. Then what comes up next for our consumers is price, right? So 69% of responders rank price as their top factor in decisions, with 58% actively seeking more deals due to rising living costs. So price is never going to be far from a consumer's mind, obviously, still ranks the top. So that's something to continue to consider this year. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, shopping journeys start across channels, not just your particular site. So what that really says to us, 59% of people begin their shopping journey on a major marketplace. And then only 21% of responders said that they start on a direct retailer's website. So I mentioned earlier that users might be starting their shopping journey on their phone and then ultimately go to a different device to purchase. It's not just the device that happens on, it's on your available sales channels as well. So they might discover you in one place and then actually purchase from one of your other channels. And then experience after checkout is really what's driving loyalty. Like Hannah mentioned earlier, now is the time to figure out who are your loyal customers, figure out who you want to be coming back, really figure out how you can continue to retain them and get some loyalty. So 81% of the responders said that free returns were very critical for them, and 78% of responders said they're likely to shop again with your brand after a positive returns experience, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Kate, just like honing in on like the last part about loyalty and like the post purchase experience, thinking with my Linnworks hat on and like the operations aspect, like how do operations play into all these things that you've discussed? Like how does this shape like customer behavior experience? How does that have an impact, like not just behind the scenes, but like the way that customers feel and behavior that you've outlined here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we talked about where your products are being discovered, whether it's and which device your consumers are using to discover your products and ultimately purchase them. That's only one half of the loyalty engine that you have available to you. The other half of that are your operations, which might not seem at first glance like a retention lever, but it really is. Operations really play a crucial role in how you're going to be remembered. So reliable on-time fulfillment, the order being accurate when they receive it, and proactive communication all throughout the process from first contact all the way through to the customer getting the item and any kind of post receipt flow, like returns or exchanges. That every time you have an opportunity to build trust with your users, you should take it. So I just want you guys to consider operations being a lever or a strategic partner that you could use to help increase that loyalty.
Yeah, definitely. And even that's from like the consumer side. But I was when we were talking through as like a team before, like preparing for this, of course, that's really important on the consumer side and how the impact it's going to have on them. But also these things on here can be like a competitive advantage as well. Like it's some of these things like might seem like obvious, but they could be really hard to do. And to Kate's point earlier, if people are browsing and they're checking like where they can get like the best delivery experience, or they look at like reviews and stuff like that, all this like leads to having like a really strong competitive advantage that shouldn't be overlooked from that aspect of it. But yeah, and also Kate, I can definitely relate to your point about the value. I don't know why I still feel like I have to book flights on a laptop rather than a phone. When you said about the price value, I don't know why that always comes to my mind that I can't do that on my phone. But yeah, it seems like the important purchases like that, yeah, has to be the laptop, has to be a big screen. But yeah, so completely echo that part that you mentioned as well. Great. Okay, so that was just like top line overview of the survey we conducted. We will share this out when the report is available. But yeah, what I got from you there, Kate, is that the themes mentioned in the survey, like the mobile first, what we spoke about, price sensitivity, post-purchase experience, they seem to all be influenced by how well like a business operates behind the scenes as well. So yeah, Kate, if you wouldn't mind just summarizing this for the people that join in, like I'm planning for 2026, what do you think retailers need to get right and take into consideration, and just summarize what you just covered in the last slide?
Yeah, yeah. So mobile friction kills conversion. Um, we talk about how so many users are using their smartphones for purchasing or simply just for discovering. Uh, what what that really can tell us is that we should be designing for mobile first, not necessarily mobile compatibility. So they might complete the purchase on that smartphone. That might just be their gateway. So it's just something to consider. Um, Price matters. I think that's probably not, that is a fact that I don't see changing anytime soon, right? So we know that that matters, but I've been thinking of operations as kind of like your silent partner because so much of it is behind the scenes. Your client doesn't see it. Um, if you have breakdown in trust because of some inefficiencies in your operation or poor communication, that's going to really erode conversion as well. So spending time to build trust is another way that you can help gain loyalty besides just having the cheapest price. Another loyalty driver, like we mentioned, are returns and delivery processes. It's not a cost center. I've spent some time talking to our users about returns recently. Our team has been spending some time looking at returns, and it's it, um, it has the potential to be a big cost center for users, but it's also a loyalty engine, like we've mentioned. So take some time considering what your returns process actually means for your users, as well as what it means for your operations. And then lastly, like we said, turning operations into a loyalty engine, a seamless post-purchase experience really matters for users, and it's the thing that's going to keep having them come back. So because we know that, we can start looking at different pieces of data and different metrics or automations that you can use to start being ahead of the game instead of trying to catch up, especially during a period like peak where things are pretty hectic. So brands that proactively manage their inventory, fulfillment, and demand signals are going to be outperforming those that are reacting to problems later on down the line.
Amazing. Thanks, Kate. And yeah, I've just seen Gary just put in, well, in the Q&A, not a question, but yeah, I couldn't have summarized it better, Gary. Gary put excellent operations is so valuable. It's the difference between revenue growth and profitable revenue growth. But yeah, couldn't agree more. Great.
Absolutely.
We are flying through, time's flying. On the next part, um, as we're coming closer to the end of the webinar, this just brings us nicely to how do we make what we've spoke about today actionable? I know Kate and Hannah have given like tips along the way. But yeah, we wanted to put this into the lens of like what teams should actually be tracking. So yeah, we just included a few things here. But yeah, I'm going to throw it back to you, Hannah, from like a data and profitability perspective. Would you mind just covering the points here and explain how they can separate top performers and what teams should be tracking?
Yeah. And I just to reiterate, like excellent operations is the root of all strong businesses. And then the other one I'd add on top of that is an obsession with the detail, be it, operational detail, but or data detail. The brands that we've seen perform best over the last number of years are those that are obsessed with the detail. And these three areas, or sorry, pardon me, four areas in terms of how can you outperform your competitors, I think are some of the ones that or hopefully that you can take away. Stock availability, it sounds obvious, but it's so key. There's been so many brands that we've worked with over the years that have had hundreds of thousands of dollars left on the table because they've run out of stock. Um, and this is where both operational efficiency, but also stringent planning can really um, uh, head home in terms of how you can win in this area. So stock availability in the top 20% of your SKUs, really knowing which are your hero SKUs, but also which of the SKUs you're going to be pushing through different sales periods and different, ebbs and flows of the year so you don't leave cash on the table. The dead stock ratio, so knowing the age of your stock, and knowing the age of your inventory, not losing out in terms of holding stock and warehouse costs money, and dead stock that isn't shifting, will never shift. So understanding what percentage of your total inventory is, in the poorer performing stock, and then thinking of smart and clever ways as to how to shift that. And some examples that we have had from brands are, you know, and bundling them into offers, giving some of them away as free gifts. Going back to Kate's point around you can really have a competitive advantage in the industry by having excellent operations, but then also having amazing customer service, and everybody loves a free gift. So, there are some of the ideas that we've heard of brands using to shift dead stock so they're not paying for it in warehouses. And then the final two are more focused on profitability and, how to box clever with your ad spend. So contribution margin at a SKU and channel level. So truly understanding across if you're an omni-channel seller or selling across marketplaces, understanding where you truly are profitable, inclusive of like ad spend, but also marketplace fees. So where could you double down in those places? So tr healthy, repeatable margin after ads and also after marketplace fees. Um, and then LTV to CAC ratio by acquisition channel and first purchase SKUs. So understanding where you're getting your most valuable customers for the price you're paying to acquire those customers by channel and by product is some of the most powerful information that brands have at their fingertips using Conjura to be able to understand, a product might generate good revenue during Black Friday, but is it generating a high value um, customer for that brand over time? And I think this is a good takeaway in terms of this little summary. Contribution margin tells you what to scale. So understanding what products are most profitable tells you which ones you might want to scale and where you might want to scale them. And LTV to CAC ratio tells you how aggressively you can scale. So it's not just about identifying what to scale, it's how aggressively can you scale in products, geos, marketplaces. And that's what I would, of everybody listening, see if you can take away um, to be able to identify what to scale, how much you can scale that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hannah. And yeah, just Kate, I just wanted to check in with you if there's anything you want to add from like an operations perspective, just to reinforce what Hannah's spoke about.
Yeah. What I really want to highlight, there's two things I wanted to highlight. One of them is, Hannah, what you had said about contribution margin and the target is a healthy and repeatable margin after ads, right? I wanted to focus on the word repeatable there because we celebrate Black Friday as this huge revenue opportunity. all of our SKUs here on our shelves are revenue opportunities, and Black Friday is one of those days that we can actually take advantage of that opportunity in a really big way. But for healthy growth, we want it to be repeatable. It's just something I wanted to mention. When we talk about metrics, something that you revisit over and over again is probably a pretty good idea. Like, get really comfortable with your metrics, get to know them very well, and look for repeated success. Um, those are going to be really good signals that you're doing the right things, right? Then the other thing I wanted to mention is how many of these metrics that Hannah you just talked through are what I consider companion metrics. So oftentimes metrics don't really exist in a silo. In order for your data to make sense, you have to consider multiple data points or multiple metrics and how they interact with each other. So I wanted to take a moment to point out, especially with these last two bullets, those are metrics that have relationships with each other. So when you're considering your operations or you're considering your strategy for ad spend, start looking at your companion metrics, or start trying to figure out which of your metrics are companions and what story they're telling when you look at them together. It's really just what I wanted to highlight there.
Yeah, 100%. They shouldn't be looked at in silo. They should all uh, be leading up to the same thing. But thanks so much, Kate. That's really great. Amazing. Okay, so just to finish up, we wanted to share a real example of what this all looks like in practice. I know we've been talking about a lot of things, but if you're anything like me, I want to see like a real life use case about this. So, yeah, this is a case study from Discounted Sunglasses, who operate across D2C and multiple marketplaces. But yeah, Hannah, I'm just going to go back to you on this. Would you mind just walking us through what changed for Discounted Sunglasses for them once they had that clear insight into profitability and inventory performance?
Yeah, for sure. So, very typically the brand rely, as so many of us do, rely on spreadsheets and estimates to understand profitability. Marketplace commissions were average, slow moving stock often went unnoticed, or dead stock went unnoticed, and leadership lacked visibility into cash tied up into aging inventory. Valuable time was spent manually stitching this data together. So, with Conjura and Linnworks, by bringing product profitability, marketplace data, commissions, and SKU level ad spend into one single source of truth, we the brand was able to immediately remove guesswork. Team could see true contribution profit by SKU, by channel or marketplace, um, highlighting what was really driving margin and what needed urgent attention. And then with the powerhouse of Conjura integrated with Linnworks, pricing decisions became faster and more precise with less room for error. Live cost prices, inventory levels, and order volumes now sit alongside profitability insights, enabling the team to protect margin, clear or get rid of aging stock, and stay competitive across every marketplace that they were playing in. So some of the key metrics or wins, I suppose, results speak for themselves. 12.7% increase in contribution margin efficiency, 6 hours saved per week across marketing and operations, smarter pricing and reduced impact from slow and dead stock, and clear performance visibility across multiple markets. I think the quote on the right is a great one. And we've had Conjura described as lots of different things, but this was the first time we were described as a sous chef. So it's like having a sous chef for data. Conjura tells us exactly what needs attention.
I love that. It's definitely a memorable quote for that. Amazing. Okay, great. Yeah, so we've just go on to our final slide. I can't believe how quick the time has gone. But yeah, as we wrap up and before we go into questions, so this is a cue for to get any questions in while I take a few minutes just to summarize everything. I just wanted to bring this back to everything that was covered today, what you can actually take away and apply. Hopefully, we're here. If there's questions, we can follow up afterwards. But yeah, just to summarize a few points on here. So, firstly, peak demand is becoming more concentrated. As Hannah said, it's definitely not more predictable. What we saw in 2025 is that success now depends on being ready at the right moment and not necessarily stretching teams and budgets across a long promotional window. So that means it's good to pressure test your plans for the day that matters the most, like we were saying about Black Friday being more concentrated this year. Secondly, consumer expectations are higher, especially after checkout, which I don't think are surprises to anyone. That it seems to be getting higher and higher. But the things that we covered were around mobile experience, delivery reliability, returns. I think it's just very clear that they're not nice to haves anymore. Like I said earlier, that they can definitely be a competitive advantage. It can definitely bring your customers coming back. You work so hard to get the customers, and you don't want to lose them. So yeah, there's definitely a difference between a one-off sale and a repeat customer. And if you're seeing drop off after purchase, like Kate said, that's an operational signal that you should look into, and it's definitely worth acting on. And then talking about operations on the third point. So operational excellence has become a growth lever. I loved this from what Kate has said. So whether that be inventory health, the speed of doing fulfillment, understanding how products perform across channels, these all directly impact both margin and customer trust. So these are just areas where small improvements can really compound like quickly in that area. And then finally, data and automation of what make all of this possible. Like I said, I think there's been things that have been covered today that you guys might have expected, or some of the things that you might be surprised by. They might have seen things that you thought, but like having this backed up actually by data just emphasizes this. But yeah, the brands that will outperform in 2026. They're not reacting to problems or challenges. They're spotting them early, acting with confidence, using that data just to back it up. So yeah, that's just a quick summary. But if you do have any questions, then please, this is your opportunity to ask them. And while we go through questions, if we just go to the final slide, I'm just going to leave this up here because I appreciate if we only show it for a second, it's hard to get your phone out and scan. But while we go through questions, there are QR codes here where you can reach out to Conjura, you can reach out to us. We will send a follow-up email of the recording, some useful links, the Conjura micro paper. But yeah, any questions or you'd like to learn more about our platforms, then please do. So yeah, I'll just leave that up on here. But if there are any questions, this is your opportunity to get them in. Like I said, we're with product and data experts, so take advantage of Hannah and Kate being here. But while we see if any questions come through, Hannah, I thought it would be good for anyone. I don't want to assume people fully know Linnworks and Conjura that are on the call. So for anyone newer to both platforms, Hannah, would you mind just explaining, and Kate, feel free to chime in, but how Linnworks and Conjura work together?
Absolutely. So Conjura is on its own is a standalone analytics platform that works across multiple uh, channels and ERPs and OMSs, and we've partnered with Linnworks now over a year actually, because there was a need from the Linnworks customer base. It came from customers to have advanced analytics sitting on top of their Linnworks data and their Linnworks channels, and ultimately bringing profitability, ad spend, um, marketplace fees, data that is not part of a traditional Linnworks stronghold, which is the backbone of the business, layering that information on top as well as all the Linnworks data to be able to bring you things, KPIs such as true contribution margin, what products are performing well at what marketplaces, inclusive of ad spend, inclusive of marketplace fees, and then, bringing that advanced element of analytics around LTV, LTV to CAC ratio, the forecasting elements around revenue stock, um, bring ultimately level up the insights Linnworks customers can get from having both in situ. And the discount sunglasses case study is completely illustrative of that. And yeah, it came the I suppose all the best product developments and partnerships come from a customer need. and it very much came from a need within the base for the two to work together. So yeah, I think, uh, Kate, Lucy, if you'd add anything there, please do. But in a nutshell, we complement the Linnworks offering by bringing advanced analytics plus additional connectors outside of the marketplace-based ad spend, marketplaces, marketplace fees to give you some really powerful insights to grow your business.
Yeah, I think you've summarized that perfectly, Hannah. And we've always made clear with like our customers, like we don't expect Linnworks to do absolutely everything. So it was the perfect partnership with having that extra layer of that advanced analytics and going into like the ad spend and like that side of it as well. So yeah, like you said, discounted sunglasses is just one of our customers that have benefited from the partnership. But yeah, I can't believe it's been a year as well, Hannah. Well, actually, it feels longer, but yeah, time flies. Great. And then just thinking around like more of the technical side, but like the implementation side, what does that look like, Hannah, and like how quickly can teams start seeing value once they're live?
Yeah, so we truly have lent into pure SaaS, software as a service offering over the years, and we very much are a plug and play solution. So, we if you are interested in learning more about Conjura, we are happy to do a demo and walk you through it, answer all your questions, your requirements. But brands get up and running between 24 or 48 hours. You get you and that's pulling up to 3 years of historical data in that initial pull, because we very much believe that that you don't wait for that data to build up. We give access to the historical data. So let's say you wanted to connect today and you were up and running by early next tomorrow or early next week, you will be able to look at your Black Friday performance 2025 versus 2024, and you can start diving into some of the kind of looking at what your KPIs were based on the metrics and benchmarks that we shared today and how you perform. So, yes, you can get up and running very quickly. You're not waiting for data to build up. You get access to all your historical data, um, and we've had many Linworks customers do exactly that.
Amazing. Great. We actually have had just one question come through, and looking at time, we'll probably just keep it to this question. So based on what you're both seeing right now, so this question to both of you, Kate and Hannah, which channels are performing strongest and where are brands seeing the biggest shifts? I know we kind of spoke about TikTok a bit earlier, but yeah, I'm gonna start with Kate actually on this if you want to comment on that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. I think, Hannah, you might have a little bit more visibility than I might. So, like we mentioned, Linworks is really good at managing the work that has to happen, but it's not really generating work. It funnels work in from your sales channels and other places. So we get to see we get to see the outcome, all of the work that you guys did on your channels as those orders come in. And so from that perspective, I can say um, the heavy hitters had great Black Fridays, right? The major marketplaces, Walmart, Amazon, um, Miracle, things like that had really great experiences. But I know Shopify had a really great year. Sellers who were on Shopify did really well this year as well. And then another thing that I've been reading a lot about lately, and I'm kind of interested in, is the difference in business models and where you perform on channels, right? So if you're primarily D2C and you don't have any presence on a larger marketplace like Amazon, um, your success comes from other areas, and success looks slightly different from somebody who's a primary Amazon seller. So I don't want to get too detailed with the answer to this question, but what I would first say is consider your business model before you start considering where you would perform best, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. But Hannah, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you could add there.
I think there's been I think the trend over the last number of years is that, there's always emerging marketplaces, and there's quite a few wins for early adopters if you're willing to put the time in. So we've seen great wins in terms of Temu, and brand and TikTok Shop, which we mentioned before. So early adopters, if you're willing to, I suppose, back yourself in some of those marketplaces, there can be both cheaper acquisition costs in terms of their ad platforms. B&Q is another one I've heard of that has had great CPAs in comparison to the traditional Google or Meta CPAs, cost per acquisition. So yeah, it definitely, there can be early adopter wins for sure. I would echo Kate's point to say that, was a huge win for another brand might not necessarily be for you. Context is key. But one of the things that I've seen lots of brands very cleverly use marketplaces for is, land and expand into new geos. So rather than setting up using marketplaces to, you know, trial new geographies. So UK brands looking to expand into the US, opening Amazon stores. They're primarily, let's say, D2C, but using Amazon to expand, or vice versa, using maybe Temu or Walmart or more familiar marketplaces within that geography to land their product is something that I've seen brands do very cleverly. Um, so there is a lot, always keep an eye on the new and emerging marketplaces. There can be some really early adopter wins. Context is key, your product in term and business model in relation to that marketplace is always key. And then, use marketplaces not just, for pure growth, but they can be used to trial new product lines, expand into new geographies, and we've seen both of them done very cleverly. So I'll leave it at that, Lucy, because I am conscious of time as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely there's an opportunity to experiment with some of them new ones. And you just made me think of like one of our customers with Temu. One, if you do put the work in, they noticed that it was I think it was like nearly 20% of like their overall sales were purely from Temu. And I think people can find it daunting with like them kind of newer channels. But if you do put the legwork into it and you're effective, you have the operations like set up and on that side, then it can be really effective. But yeah, like I said, time has flied. And yeah, just want to thank you, Kate and Hannah, so much for joining me today to talk through this. Want to thank everybody, the attendees that joined. Like I said, we'll follow up with a recording and some links. But yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.